Thank you, Senator Padilla. Ms. Richardson, you stated in court, you described a meeting in 2017 where a BOP supervisor told you and other assembled female prisoners, quote, "I don't want to hear nothing about my officers touching you." And another officer who ignored pleas for help from a group of female prisoners and said that your abuser, quote, "will eventually get caught." What was it like to hear those things, and what, in your view, was it about MCC New York and the environment there that contributed to that culture?
Well, two of those statements weren't actually made by me. It was made by my the other ladies on the complaint. But I did hear one of the statements by Counselor Lewis, and at the time it didn't register to me what it actually meant. But the dynamics of that place, like I said before, wrong or right doesn't matter. They all stick together.
Unpack that a little bit for us, please, Ms. Richardson.
Well, just like you said the statement of that was Counselor Lewis. She's saying, well, I don't want to hear anything about what my officers are doing to you ladies. Everybody wants to cover their own butt, so they basically stick. They don't do anything about what they hear. They sort of like sweep it under the carpet.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Ms. Moore, you explained how the captain would take you to isolated areas where there weren't security cameras. Talk a little bit about the presence of cameras in the prison, the lack of coverage of certain areas in the prison, and how that contributed to an environment where you and others were vulnerable.
There weren't. Where I was at a camp, so the cameras are there's not very many at a camp. Maybe they have some in the buildings, but Alderson, if you've ever been there, is really big. And so there's 75% of the place is not covered by cameras. And then, in his office, of course, his office doesn't have a camera in it, And then there are certain parts in the building where we slept where like the counselors and the case managers worked that didn't have cameras in those areas, So being at a camp, they say it's supposed to be low security, so I'm assuming that's why they don't have as many cameras. But for things like this, I feel like there could be more, even if it's just some outside, just more. And then, what can you do about a camera in his office? He's a captain. Of course, they're probably not going to put a camera in his office, So it's like he had the perfect opportunity being there with little visibility for anyone to see.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Professor Smith, let's talk a little bit about the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And it's perhaps obvious given the title, but what is the purpose of the Prison Rape Elimination Act?
The purpose is not only prevention, but also detection, punishment, and also to create the conditions, whether it's the law, whether it's policy, whether it's related to prosecution, to end sexual abuse of people in custody. Yeah, that is the aim.
And Professor Smith, one of the most concerning aspects of our investigation is that we found these PREA audits that were conducted during times when there was ongoing sexual abuse inside Dublin, inside Coleman. And yet, the auditors found and stated in these reports that both facilities met or exceeded every PREA standard. Talk a little bit about that. And I have to ask the question, do these audits work?
I think as I testified, there are significant problems with the audit, and there need to be substantial improvements. Currently, we have we have prisons. As I've mentioned, we have prisons who are we we have the people who are supposed to be being audited, auditing themselves, essentially. And so what happens, there's not a great deal of diversity. What we have is we have auditors who formerly worked at prisoners as wardens. We have we have agencies who audit each other, and so there's a disincentive for them to actually find another agency out of compliance, because they're concerned that when they are audited, that they will be found out of compliance. And so I think that what is really important is having neutral auditors, to have people who are clearly not a part of that system, and also to have audits of the audits, to actually go behind in the same way that you did in that report, to actually identify, yes, there were 0 complaints here, but we looked at case law and we looked at actually criminal complaints, and this doesn't match up with what you're reporting. And so I think that it has to be more than the actual audit, but there actually has to be some other independent verification of that audit, which would include, as the committee has done here, looking at whether there are complaints, looking at litigation, talking to external organizations, talking to people who are outside of the system.
Professor Smith, my time remaining is brief, if you can attempt this one. Do you think it would be helpful to have more women working in facilities that incarcerate women?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I testified to that as well. I mean, the presence of female staff. I mean, in fact, one of the huge issues that come to bear in each of these situations is how did these male staff actually have unfettered access to women inmates? They should have been, a door should have been open, female staff should have been walking through, and in many places, what has happened is female staff are the only ones who are allowed to perform certain services or perform in certain ways with female inmates.
Thank you, Professor Smith.